Okay, take two on treatment moves towards recovery. Okay, wait for it, wait for it. Okay, welcome back, friends, to Addiction Alliance Programming. The last segment we spoke at some length about treatment, what treatment is, some expectations and barriers, and as I review, every segment will be a brief review of what came last to move forward into what comes next. I want to mention that there are barriers throughout recovery, including during treatment. It's not just about showing up for treatment, logging on to the internet or showing up to the building. There are barriers once you get here, paying attention, managing anxiety and depression, managing distractions, avoiding being a distraction yourself, the temperature of the room, the thoughts in your head, the feelings that are going on. I mean, you name it. Sometimes I look around the room and I'm wondering who's actually present. The point of treatment is to be present and to get something out of it. In other words, treatment should not be viewed as some onerous task that is a real drag. Treatment should be your way of life, and treatment should be your real world in those moments you're in. You should prepare for treatment before you get here to make sure you're present. What does that look like? Calming down and getting prepared and getting ready to focus. In the moment, you should try your hardest to focus and be present. And then when you leave, you don't just turn it off and go back to your life, because treatment is the way of life. So you should live the treatment moving forward, which means put what you've learned to work. So therefore, treatment is about learning. It would be nice if all you had to do to make change, because that's what treatment's about, is change, is that all you would have to do is go to treatment and then somehow magically it flips some switch. This is not how it works. Trust me, your brain, your mind, that kind of runs the show, for better or for worse, has been programmed a certain way to respond a certain way with certain behaviors and thoughts and feelings to your environment. We're going to talk about that. And that is hardwired in. That's programmed in. And we got to learn to reprogram our brain. We got to learn to reprogram our mind so that we can behave differently. So treatment for substance use disorder and trauma and mental health is about addressing behaviors. Therefore, it is treatment for behavioral health. I am a behavioral health treatment specialist. So now we're narrowing down what treatment actually does. Most people think that I'm coming to treatment to stop the behavior of drugs and alcohol, and that's about as far as they're going, you know, in terms of exploring what this is all about. There's some problems with that, because being dependent on drugs and alcohol, and we're going to talk about that, means that it's very hard to give it up and stop the behavior. So there's a lot of determination and hard work that's required, we spoke to that, to make that change, to change the behavior. If treatment is about changing behaviors, we've got to understand what behaviors are and what they consist of, and we're going to talk about that. So every conversation opens up another conversation moving forward. These conversations beget other conversations, beget other conversations. So we focus on the current conversation and we move on to the next one. So what is treatment? Treatment is addressing the problem. You got to understand what the problem is, why we're here. You got to understand what to do about it. We are going to get into that. This treatment takes what myself and my colleagues have learned from their own treatments and what we've been taught in trainings, and then we filter that through our common sense of the real world, and we try to come up with a treatment program that is approachable, understandable, and user-friendly. Have a dictionary handy. I might use some words that you have never heard before. Look it up on the dictionary. Now you've learned a new word. None of the concepts that we're talking about are beyond the scope of the imagination or the intelligence, the intellectual capability of virtually anyone who logs on. If you've had a traumatic brain injury or you have a cognitive deficit, that might be a problem. The vast majority of folks who are eligible for this type of treatment are going to be able to understand the concepts if they open their minds, participate, pay attention, and are willing to learn. We are here. Treatment's about learning. If it were just about showing up to a building, boy, I tell you what, the average treatment program would work. Many people show up to a building for a program, aren't paying attention, and what they're paying attention to may or may not even be helpful. We spoke a little bit in the last segment about how this program needs to be better than the average treatment program. What are the barriers to the average treatment program being helpful? Lack of funding, lack of competent staff, and then lack of a cohesive, viable, evidence-based, but also user-friendly curriculum for the program. I'm going to lay out the curriculum of this program next. And we talked a little bit about how it's scientifically evidence-based and it's also based in common sense. It's a user-friendly program that is going to hopefully address the things that need to be addressed as you work towards the payoff of treatment, which is recovery. We are here to learn recovery. So the next step is to, well, what is recovery? And we're going to talk about that at great length for as long as you're with us. So treatment leads to recovery. Treatment is anecdotal and brief. Best case scenario is you go to a treatment center. I think the longest one I've ever really heard of is 6 months. Seems like a long time, but when you look at recovery as being a lifelong journey, then 2 weeks, 30 days, 45 days, 8 weeks, 6 months, it's really just a moment in time on the scale of your life. Folks come to treatment to live. Many people come to treatment because they are quite certain they will die from the very dangerous behaviors of using drugs and alcohol. Drugs and alcohol are very dangerous by nature. They can kill you. And then, of course, the behaviors that are associated with drugs and alcohol are also very dangerous. So it's a lethal way of life. Treatment addresses that by helping us become safe. So treatment is about safety. But it is a moment in time. And what we are trying to do in treatment to learn recovery from substance use disorder and the co-occurring or the pre-existing or the rider, if you will, the things that come along with addiction that we need to address and treat. We are addressing those things in a moment in time, bearing in mind that recovery, which is the goal of treatment, is a lifelong endeavor. So we try to set the stage for recovery. That's what treatment is. Treatment is not final. It is not some sort of finality, like all of a sudden, aha, I'm fixed and I'm ready to rock and roll and do life and I'll never use drugs and alcohol again. That is not the case. Get used to the idea of recovery being a chronic occupation, which means I'm always doing it. So, treatment leads to recovery. What is recovery? Most folks, I think, based on experience and lots of interviews and lots of observation, people think that they go to treatment to get fixed or learn how to stop using drugs and alcohol. They go to treatment for addiction. I'm going to a rehab center. I'm going to a rehab. Why is that? Oh, I use drugs. I use alcohol. And it's killing me. It's ruining my life. My probation officer says I need to go to treatment. My CPS worker says I need to go to treatment. My mom and dad say I need to go to treatment. My brain tells me I need to go to treatment. Thumbs up. That's good. It's a good start. Because yes, drugs and alcohol will prevent you from living functionally. And we're going to talk a lot about that. I'm here to tell you that recovery, which is the goal of treatment is a lot more than just abstinence from drugs and alcohol. Abstinence opens the door. It is the proverbial first step to building recovery. Can you have recovery while or can you use substances in recovery? Those are great topics, and we're going to address that too. Some substances are legal. Some substances aren't so-called drugs of choice. Some substances, it's questionable whether they interfere with recovery. We are a harm reduction program, which means we are here to help folks live and prosper. So some of those questions are to be answered by you. We can give some insight into it, but ultimately it is your decision what you are going to address in recovery. But basically speaking, recovery doesn't exist if you're using mind-altering substances for the purpose of stress reduction or relieving suffering and all the other reasons we're going to talk about for why people use substances. So recovery is conditional. But it's not just about abstinence. So recovery has abstinence as a component, but if it's just abstaining from substances, that is not what we call a holistic program of recovery. Quitting the substances, putting them on the no-fly list, which is what I often call it, that is required, and it is a first step. And what that does is it opens up the possibility to create a program of recovery that is meaningful, sustainable, works, and allows you to meet the goals and objectives that everyone comes in with. When people come into treatment thinking that I need to quit using drugs and alcohol because I want to get my kids back, because I want to avoid prison, because I want to improve my credit score, because I want to get my self-respect back and the esteem of the community. Yes, those are all the goals and objectives that people come in with to treatment, and those are all noble and worthwhile goals. In this program, in this treatment program, we are going to investigate what it takes to make treatment turn into recovery, which means motivation to keep doing your recovery day in and day out. Usually those goals and objectives, those specific goals and objectives, lose their luster and do not provide the fuel that is needed for long-term sustainable recovery. We're going to use those words, long-term sustainable recovery. I've seen 1 million people quit using drugs and alcohol for a minute or an hour or a day or a week or a month, and then they lose their steam, they lose their motivation. We're going to figure out what proper motivation is and how to keep it going. And we're going to talk about how recovery is about doing recovery for the sake of recovery, because it's the right thing to do. And why is it the right thing to do? Because it's the proper way to live. Those sound like moral value judgments, so be it. You can't separate morals and ethics from recovery, because morals and ethics are part of recovery. So if treatment leads us hopefully to recovery, what is recovery? First of all, what does the word recovery mean? You look in the dictionary, oftentimes I do. One of the definitions in the medical realm is to heal. Is to heal. You've been injured, and recovery means you're healing. Now, you might go to the gym, you might do a bunch of squats. That's a classic example of what gets sore the next day. You might do a whole lot of squats and leg presses or lunges, and whether you're in shape or not, the next day you might feel very, very, very sore, and that's because your muscles are recovering from the stress of the exercise. Many people know that when you exercise and you work your strength training, breaks down muscle tissue, and muscle builds when it heals, right? And you're sore because of that. There are a variety of other things, lactic acid and all the rest, but it's recovery. Your muscles are recovering, and they hurt for a while, and then they get better. Your muscles are healing. Recovery treatment leading to recovery is about healing. And a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people come to treatment thinking recovery is I'm a bad person and I need to get fixed, or there's something wrong with me and I need to get fixed. I've been trying for a long, long time to quit using drugs and alcohol, and I can't do it on my own, so I need help getting better, doing something different, getting fixed. But the idea of healing isn't part of that understanding of the process. This is about healing, and we've got to figure out why. What is it that's injured us, and what part of us has been injured? So recovery is about healing. What I've noticed about healing, working in hospitals and in my own life with injuries and observing others with injuries, is healing is very, very painful. One thing about this culture is we don't like pain because it turns into suffering, so we avoid pain at all costs. It's a $1 trillion pharmaceutical industry. Over the counter, you can walk into any drugstore and find 1 million different over-the-counter remedies for any kind of irritation, any kind of distress, any kind of discomfort, any kind of pain. Everything from NSAIDs, ibuprofen, and aspirin to antihistamines, low-grade steroid skin creams for itches. You name the irritation, the discomfort, or the pain, and there is a scientific way to get rid of it. That makes us kind of sensitive to pain, and we want quick fixes. We want instant gratification solutions to our pain. Well, recovery is a long process that includes learning how to understand, identify, and tolerate pain. Moreover, healing, which is the initial part of the recovery process, is very, very painful. And if you don't understand that, you will suffer. If you're looking for a quick fix to your substance use disorder, or your mental health issues, or your trauma stress responses, well, I'm glad you're here because I'm going to help you explain that there is no such thing. I'm going to suggest some skills and tools that can help alleviate the suffering quickly in real time, but it is still a painful process. Recovery is healing and it is painful. I'm sorry for that, but that's just the way it is. And if you don't accept that, we're practicing denial. Recovery is about understanding what it is that's getting in the way of wellness and healing and betterment, if you will, change. We got to identify the barriers to change and remove them so we can make that change. I am not here to tell anyone what to change. You come to us with goals and objectives, and we figure out how to make that happen. But I am here to suggest that it is not just about the drugs and the alcohol. Recovery is about understanding what was present all along that made drugs and alcohol so enticing. Then we get to mold that in our minds and come to terms with it and accept it. And we get to accept it some more. And then just when you think you've done all the acceptance, then we're going to accept it even more. And then we get to talk about what we do about it. So in this initial period, we're going to talk a whole lot about what are we doing here? Why are we here? What is addiction? We've got to come up with a pretty good working definition that allows us with grace and dignity, not denial, not a lack of accountability, not just trying to get off the hook. I'm a trauma survivor, so I get to use a bunch of drugs because that's what trauma survivors do. That never helped anyone. We're here to come up with an understanding of why we're here and then a reliable roadmap or blueprint for how to move forward into recovery. Recovery is a way of life, just like using drugs and alcohol is a way of life. And if you are what we call late-stage substance use disorder, it has become a way of life. It dominates the way of life. To call it a lifestyle, I think, is almost casual. It's a way of life. You think about your health, you think about your relationships, you think about your spirituality, you think about your mental health. The way of life of daily drug addiction impacts all of those dimensions. Therefore, it is a way of life. Recovery is a new way of life. You remove the drugs and the alcohol because you have to. Then you learn how to do what? Well, in 12 steps, they say live life on life's terms. In our program, we say you just learn how to do life without falling apart. And we'll talk about what falling apart means. Coming undone, melting down, going off, getting high. These are the outcomes of doing life without skill and insight. Recovery is about developing skills and insight. Insight is knowledge into how you operate. Wisdom is putting that insight to work. And we will talk about that. So this is an introduction into what recovery is. Yeah, it's about a life without drugs and alcohol. And at first that seems like a grievous way to be. A lot of folks are just like, I can't function without drugs. What's the point of living without alcohol? I've tried that before. Trust me, it doesn't work. This is what I hear a lot. Oh, I was clean for 3 years, and I was Yes, it is possible, if not likely, to be miserable without drugs and alcohol if you go about it the wrong way. Get ready for some cheesy motivation here. Recovery is some call it a gift. I call it a real privilege to be able to live life on its terms without falling apart and deal with what life is throwing at you with grace and humility and dignity, and to prove to yourself and the world that you can handle it and never look back in terms of drugs and alcohol. That to me is a great privilege, and it's a wonderful thing, and it is a gift. A lot of people come into treatment and looking at recovery as a curse. Oh, it's something I got to do. It's unclear whether I really want to. If you understand that recovery is a need and not a desire, it helps wrap your mind around how to live recovery properly so that it is viewed as a wondrous thing. Recovery is one growth opportunity after another. No matter how far along the line you are, your first year, your 15th year, your 50th year in recovery, it is constantly a growth opportunity to learn and become better, become seasoned, become the criminal justice system talks about, well, we don't want you in the community because you're a menace to society. It's unclear whether you are a valued member of society. What is a valued member of society? It's someone who gives back to the community through mentoring and through wisdom, someone who is an asset to the community because they help preserve the community and they're a steward of the community resources. First thing that comes to mind is helping teach children how to live correctly. So recovery is an opportunity for all of those things. It's a growth opportunity every single day to, reach potential. We talked about contentment and peace of mind. These are the concepts that we talk about in this recovery program. It's not just about picking up chips and tags, denoting how many hours, days, weeks, years, months that you have clean. It's about what are you doing with your time on earth. You get rid of the drugs and the alcohol and you have an opportunity to do a whole lot of special things for yourself and others. That's what recovery is. It's a wonderful thing. I was always afraid of it. I always viewed it as something that, you had to do, because the joke was over and the fun was over and all the rest. I've really changed my mind about recovery, which brings me to a really good point. Recovery is about changing your mind, changing the way your mind works. Little teaser alert, managing stress. We're going to talk a lot about stress response and stress management. We're going to understand how our mind responds to things like stress, and then we're going to learn how to respond differently. Just change your mind. So, recovery is a whole lot of things. It's also it's not a whole lot of things, and we're here to dispel a lot of myths too. Great myth that I hear all the time is you can't have fun in recovery. Well, first of all, we've got to figure out what fun means, and we'll look back on all that fun we had and see if it was really fun. Yeah. And then we're going to wrap our minds around how, taking the dog for a walk on a beautiful autumn morning is not only fun, it is really meaningful. How just getting up and going about your day and doing mundane things like cleaning the cat box and showing up for work and then teaching your kid a little bit of math at home and then going to bed is fun. We're going to talk about a lot of different stuff. This is what recovery is. And then the other thing is, that I mentioned, is recovery is an absolute need. Human beings were not either created or designed to harm themselves in such manner. You might pick up on the vibe in this program that recovery is almost a sacred thing. Get rid of all the religious baggage that you might have. It's sacred, meaning it's something holy, something very necessary for our spirit and for the communal spirit of mankind, and probably, definitely, the communal spirit of the earth and the universe. My belief is that when one human being harms themselves or harms another, they are harming the entire universe. Recovery is about self-care. Learning why it's so important to take care of yourself, and then learning how to take care of yourself in a million different ways. So if your expectation is, I'm just going to quit drugs and alcohol, and I'll be in recovery, we're going to talk about that because that's misguided. Quite frankly, the treatments that I've experienced and I've observed over the years are something like JV squad or intramural sports. We are talking about first team All-American varsity squad treatment. The people I work with are heavy hitters. They've seen a whole lot. They've endured a whole lot. And for some folks, this is the end of the line. I want this to be the last treatment you've ever had, not because you're going to go out and relapse and die or get locked up and not get treatment again, because this is the last treatment you will ever have, because this will be a springboard into real recovery. In order for that to work, you've got to understand everything that recovery is. It's a lot. I'm not here to stress anyone out, but it is a lot. We are going to learn how to take care of ourselves in a million different ways. Things like exercise, sleep, and nutrition. It is part of recovery. Spirituality, part of recovery. Taking care of your mental health, part of your recovery. Repairing, forming, and managing relationships, part of your recovery. Becoming comfortable with your place in society, part of recovery. So, welcome to recovery is all I can say.